Hi there, this is Josh from Literary Gladiators, and the Roaring Twenties are here again. This is the very first video that the Literary Gladiators channel is releasing for the new year and for the new decade, and I thought that I would finally address something that many book enthusiasts or just general individuals would like to know, and that is my list of what are my favorite books of all time. One of the easiest bookish questions to ask and one of the hardest bookish questions to answer is, what's your favorite book? And so I thought that I would create a video telling you my 10 favorite books of all time, ranked from 10 to 1, and this list will probably be updated every 10 years or so. I think that this is a great way to kick off the decade. Hopefully we're still around in 2030. But before I begin with my 10 best books of all time, I thought I would throw in an honorable mention. And this is an honorable mention on the basis that I cannot really rank this properly. And that is the complete book of U.S. presidents, which was started by William A. DiGregorio. And this is the 8th edition, which was updated by Sandra Lee Stewart. And this includes information about the 2012 presidential election. This book has just about everything you need to know about each of the American presidents that has served in this country. And this is the first book that I refer to when it comes to learning about U.S. presidents. I find myself dipping in and out of this. At one point, as an adult, I would like to read this in its entirety throughout. I have done so when I was younger, but I'd like to go through this a bit more at the age that I'm at, because this has anything and everything from their personal lives, their upbringings, their presidency, their cabinet, their elections, the Supreme Court justices that they appointed, and everything else in between. So, now for the list itself. The number 10 slot on my list goes to The Neverending Story by Michael Ende. This version's translated into English by Ralph Manheim. And The Neverending Story is a book that I was introduced to 15 years ago for a summer program that I took part in. And this is the book that we read. I really didn't get to read much of it back then, and I really wasn't able to appreciate it as much. But I picked it up last year in order to prepare for a Season 9 discussion, and I'm so glad that I did. This book is just amazing. It's an amazing work of fantasy because it follows a humble, modest, and somewhat awkward Bastian, and he is such a likable character in how he is perfectly human for the age that he is at. And this work of fantasy is somewhat of an epiphany, a coming-of-age piece, and it really does a lot to go against the common structure that that media has put in place. But one of the best accomplishments that this book has to offer is that it is able to do in one book that many of series take 3, 4, 5, 10, or more books to accomplish. I think that we get so much out of this, and as a reader, I can really appreciate this as both someone that loves to read and someone that that likes to engage in a relationship or an interaction with books, and this one takes it to a whole new level. Number 9 on my list is the Barnes & Noble Classics edition of Aesop's Fables. This is translated into English by V.S. Vernon Jones, and this is the entirety of Aesop's Fables. These are witty, clever, humorous, thought-provoking, and most importantly, they're timeless. The shepherd boy and the wolf, which we know as The Boy Who Cried Wolf, is perhaps the tale that people know the most for its common structure. But back in Season 8, we went over The Milkmaid and Her Pail, which the phrase, "don't count your chickens before they hatch," comes from that particular tale. And it's just amazing how these stand the test of time, and the way that Aesop was able to incorporate different people, animals, inanimate beings, things, and whatnot. And I think that these are just amazing. I really like to revisit these and dip in and out of them myself. Number 8 on my list is the book that I ranked number 1 as my favorite book of 2019, and that is Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. I feel that in a world where King Kuntz and Anne Rice are dominant in the horror fiction field, even though Robert McCammon can be seen as general speculative fiction, and he really doesn't identify himself in any genre. He's often classified as a horror fiction writer and is often compared to horror writers. But Boy's Life goes beyond that. And I think that this is the way that Robert McCammon, it really reflects who he is. Boy's Life has elements of fantasy and horror, but they can every aspect of fantasy and horror within this book can be tied to a string of reality, the string of something that can actually happen. And it really creates a whirlwind for the reader. And when I was reading this, I only read this within a few days, and I was immersed in the world that McCammon put together here through the eyes of Corey Mankinson. One of the best accomplishments that this book offers is that every character is meaningful in this piece. Whether you admire, respect, sympathize, or you despise, or loathe, or you laugh at them, or you love to hate them, or any of those particular aspects. Even the supporting cast, and those that you feel are just there for ridicule, those characters really bring something to the piece. And it really is an ode to McCammon's appreciation for the craft of fiction and for speculative fiction. And I think that Boy's Life was seen as McCammon's greatest book. This is only the first book of his that I read, but this sure does set the bar very high. And I definitely want to read more from McCammon in the years to come. Hopefully there's one or more books that I can add to this, to either this list or the best books I read in each year during the 2020s. Stephen King is a favorite author of mine, and I have trouble choosing which of his books is my favorite. I have it down to 3, so that's how I'm going to rank them for the number 7 slot. It's a 3-way tie between The Green Mile, Bag of Bones, and Hearts in Atlantis. These books these were written and released during King's Renaissance during the late 90s, and they each offer something different. The Green Mile is a bit more horror and adventure based, and it is set in a prison following the accusation and sentencing of a big black man by the name of John Coffey, and the relationship that the guards and wardens and the head warden, Paul Edgecombe, build with Coffey. And you have Bag of Bones, which is a bit more literary, but it has horror and ghost elements to it. Mike Noonan is an author and a widower, and he begins to form a strong friendship with a young woman, a single mom, and her young daughter, and he really begins to make connections. He begins to connect with them in their struggles. And then Hearts in Atlantis has to do with the growing up during the Vietnam War. The first story is set right at the rise of the war in Vietnam, late 50s, early 60s, and the rest of the novellas within the piece, because Hearts in Atlantis is a collection of novellas that are connected with one another, they connect to that first story, where Bobby Garfield is... It primarily follows Bobby Garfield in his childhood and the relationship he builds with an older man. The film adaptation has the late Antoine Yelkin playing Bobby, and Anthony Hopkins plays the older man. But those 3 books, it all depends on the mood that I'm in as regarding which one is my favorite, but that's how I'm putting it. Number 6, I chose Demian by Hermann Hesse. And this version was translated into English by Michael Rolfe and Michael Lebeck. And this book follows Emil Sinclair, who's essentially Hermann Hesse, in this quest for enlightenment. And this really is straightforward and honest with the way that one sees life, and he builds this relation. He forms this relationship with a Max Demian, who is very complex, but yet straightforward with regard to his beliefs, and it gives this idea that misdeeds are necessary in being able to highlight and make a world of good exist. And probably the strongest message that I got out of this book was when Sinclair was talking to the organ player at the church, who told him that the reason that one has issues with another is that they possess traits that are similar or the same to theirs, and that someone that is completely different does not affect or bother anybody bother one person in a certain way. And that really enlightened me, because of that whole idea that it's usually people that have common negative traits, or common such as stubbornness or type A personality, that happen to clash with each other. Number 5 on my list is, to me, the master of absurdism, and that is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. And I feel that both of these books are necessary to this list, and they're necessary to one another. So this is going to be another tie. But Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is a bit more character-driven, in which the characters possess insightful messages, whereas Through the Looking Glass is more message-driven, in which the characters are the ones that allow the messages to drive the book home. But you get everything from the Dodos and their decision to pick a leader, and the Mad Hatter trying to figure out the Mad Hatter and his riddle. There's Humpty Dumpty and the Unbirthdays, and the Red King, and what he bears and possesses in the world of Wonderland. The ultimate message in this book is, if one is ready to question the absurdity and how strange it really is, one needs to start looking and questioning at their own world and see how absurd and strange that it is. Number 4 on my list is my favorite thriller, and it's a book that I read back in 2008. It's Tell No One by Harlan Coben. Tell No One, I read this to prepare for an author event that Harlan Coben was speaking at, and this is such a meaningful... This book not only does a great job possessing thriller elements that have all of the twists and turns, but it also captures what it means to be in a meaningful relationship. In this case, Dr. David Beck is a pediatrician, and his wife had gone missing. He thinks, and those around him think, that she is gone. But she sends him an email with a secret message that only the two of them knew, and at this case, he feels that somewhere and some way she's still living, and he frantically goes and looks for her, which tell no one is what she tells. Tell no one is what she says to him regarding the message. And this book is just it's such an exciting ride, and it's one that I have yet to experience with any other book of this nature. And I've read more from Harlan Coben. I've liked what I've read from him, and I'm looking forward to reading more from him. But this is definitely something I want to revisit at some time. Number 3 on my list is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. And this book is the best book that I've read that has to pertain to giving me insight on another culture. And in this case, it is growing up in Afghanistan, just as Amir did. It starts out following Amir and his father, and Amir's friendship with Hassan, how things start to transition, how events take place within Afghanistan, where terrorist attacks are as common as rain, and Amir's arrival in America with his dad and his ability to pick up acclaim as a writer, but it also follows his need and opportunity to redeem himself from things that happened when he was younger. But this book was just so engaging, so informative, and it really does a great job giving me a better understanding of life and culture for someone from Afghanistan. And I think that there are great moments of strong feelings and humor within this piece as well. Number 2 on my list is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And I read this for the first time during my sophomore year of high school, but because it was high school and because I wasn't as engaged, I didn't get so much out of it. I read this again back in 2014, and I'm so glad that I did so, because as an avid reader who appreciates the art of the written word, this book has become so meaningful, and it really makes me feel, it really gives me that sense that reading, and especially reading physical books, is so important, because there is that moment in the book with the firemen where Guy Montag is a fireman, but firemen don't put out fires, they start them to burn books. And in this world, firemen have always put out fires to start books. And Benjamin Franklin was the one that invented it. But it goes to show you that the significance and the importance of physical books, because they can, without them, these are the kinds of things that happen. And these are the kinds of things that only physical books and not e-readers have the ability to possess. But you also have the kinds of characters within the piece. You have Guy Montag is you, the reader, and you, the questioning individual. You have Beatty, who represents authority. Clarice represents the embracing of being against the common grain. You have Mildred, Guy's wife, who represents the conformist. And then you have Faber, who represents intellectual knowledge and thought. This book has so much, and Ray Bradbury was such an extraordinary individual. Number one on my list, my favorite book of all time, is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I got this book as a Christmas gift in 2008 from my mom. I didn't have it on my Christmas wish list, but she gave it to me, and I decided to read this in 2010 when the anatomy class was assigned to do a PowerPoint presentation on this book. I was taking environmental science, but I thought that it would be the right time to pick this book up and read it, because some of my friends were taking anatomy, and I'm so glad that I did so, because this book is just so meaningful in how it speaks for anybody that has or deals with a mental disability or condition. And this book, being written in the early 1960s, was a pioneer when it came to recognizing the fact that there are more to people with mental disabilities and conditions, and they deserve an equal amount of respect and love as anybody else. I know that there's the argument that with physical disabilities, they may have a physical disadvantage, and their conditions definitely deserve the proper attention. In this book, it also shows you that people with a physical disability can blend in better with the general society than somebody with a mental disability, and how people liked being able to take advantage of Charlie when he was mentally insufficient, but when he gets that opportunity to become a genius the way that the tested mouse Algernon was, he really seems to reflect somebody with a more an intellectual condition like Asperger's syndrome or a higher functioning autism, and it really, people don't like the fact that he is much more aware. The strongest message that this book has to offer is you can have forward progress and advancement in technology and medicine and whatnot, but if you're unable to demonstrate a sense of love, compassion, and empathy, all of these accomplishments mean nothing. And this book reminds us of that, and does a fantastic job in doing so. I had the ability to read this twice. I read it a second time in 2017, and on that second occasion, I really was able to embrace that sense of why I love this book the first time, and why I'm going to continue to admire this book and champion this book. Here are my 10 favorite books, which includes the honorable mention, best of all time, as we speak, may be subject to change, but for now, as of January 1st, 2020, that's how it goes. Thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you check out some more videos from our channel. We have a lot in store for 2020. Our goal is to reach 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If you like what you see on this channel, please subscribe for more videos. And with this video, please give it a like. And if you want to talk about these books, please comment down below. Thank you for tuning into this video. And for now, and as always, I encourage you to keep reading.